Hello YouTube, good morning, good afternoon, good evening and good night depending on whereabouts you are in the world, and welcome to another edition of Small World Games. Today I'm going to be looking at some more Judge Dredd, the miniatures game from Warlord Games, in the form of a painting, what do I say, tutorial guide, just an example of one way of painting a Judge Dredd miniature, in this case the man himself, Judge Dredd. So just to have a quick look. To start with this, I've obviously cleaned up and based the model. It's this new resin stuff. I don't know whether or not I said last time I'm not the biggest fan of it myself personally. I'm sure there's people who say otherwise, but I've found it a little bit tricky to clean up compared to just normal plastic or metal or other versions of resin. However, it is also gradually seems to be getting a bit better, so we'll just see how we go with that. But yep, I've cleaned them up. I've cut that the base the model already had off. I don't know what you call that, the moulded on base. I've taken that off and I've stuck it straight down to one of the supplied plastic bases, and I've just given that a little going over with some sand and gravelly bits, and then I've just given the whole model a spray with the Army Painter's uniform grey. You can use any grey for that, or any colouring. I mean, black, for example, would do a similar job. It's just that I'm not going to be having any grey parts on, apart from the base, but I'm not going to have any grey parts on the model itself. So if you did use another type of grey, for example, like I think it's called Mechrite grey from Games Workshop Citadel, for example, it won't be a big deal at this stage. So that's the colour I've gone with here. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is apply it to my Citadel painting grip. Again, if we get the actual name for these, it's been a while since I bought this now. Just got to make sure I've got all my tools to hand. I've got my painting pad here. I've got my palette pad, book of palette pads. I've still got that from a few years ago, so I've got a few left. I've got a medium layer brush, which I'm pretty much going to be doing most of this with. Got my little pot of water, and I'm going to be starting things off by going over the main part of the uniform with Citadel Colour's Abaddon Black. So I'm going to start off by adding some out. Give this a little bit of water to, as I'll be doing 2 thin coats. Is there any other way to do it? A bit more paint. That's it. So I'm going to have a bit of black and make sure I've got an even amount. I'm going to just start by going over the areas of uniform. Right then, so there is the first coat of Abaddon Black on there. I haven't been too neat with that, mainly because I just want to get it on and get cracking. It's not going to kind of interfere with what I've done so far. So up next, I'm going to work on the boots, gloves, elbow and knee pads, and the belt, and that little ammo pouch around his leg there, with a base coat of Castellan Green. Now I'm going for a more sort of I don't know, the word is moot, a more reduced sort of brightness to the green compared to some other examples. I wanted something a bit more militaristic, a bit more sort of, I don't know how I'd imagine it would look in a sort of paramilitary police force like the Judges. I'd imagine there'd sort of be tie-ins like that, so that's what I'm going to be using. What I didn't say at the start was, what I'm trying to achieve here is very much a, shall I say, a sort of very much a tabletop standard scheme. I'm a slow, try as I might, I'm a slow painter, and if I put my all into everything, I'll never get anything achieved. So if you are looking for something a bit more detailed, there are lots of other very good and very useful tutorials out there. Not only for the Judge Dredd models, the Judge models themselves, but also for just general things that will cross over quite nicely. So now just adding final bit of green to the clenched, don't see that, try and get it in the light as best I can, just to the clenched fist here. And okay. And that, oh no, not quite. Missed quite a major bit towards the front there. A bit of corner of the arm there. Brush is starting to come apart a bit. I'll have to break out the new one in a second. But I still quite like these. Let's see, an older one for the base. And there we go. So that's the second base coat applied, the Castellan Green to the sort of lighter armour areas. So next up, we're going to be moving on to the gold. For that, I'm going to be using a base coat of Balthasar Gold, and this particular colour is going to be on the shoulder pads, the buckle, the badge, basically all the metallic areas that don't include the gun, the lore master, sorry, the lore giver, and the day stick, the handle of the day stick. So I'm just going to lightly, I'll give this some watering down, and I'm just going to apply it. The usual rule applies. Couple of thin coats, as Mr. Rhodes says. So I'm just going to apply that to those heavier armoured areas and well, generally most of the metallic areas. Okay, so just the last bit here, I'm going to be adding this to the belt buckle, the Aquila. Okay, and that's the next layer done. The first layer of gold, and that was, just to recap, Balthasar Gold added as a base. And next up, I'm going to be doing a layer of Leadbelcher. Oh, another little shake. Adding a layer of Leadbelcher to the weapons, or a part of the weapons. So first up, the Lore Master. Now this is where I'm starting to be a little bit more careful, because I am going to start potentially going over areas that I've already done, so a bit more careful with these. But again, in some respects, I'm going to be adding washes and a layer of a layer paint over a lot of this, so even then some spillages aren't going to be the end of the world, but all in all, best to try and avoid them. here we have one of the slightly more fiddly bits, which I'm just finishing off. Sorry if there's any background noise from outside. I'm right next to the window here, and it is raining a little bit. I'll say a little bit, it's raining quite a lot, but unfortunately I can't quite stretch to a soundproof studio to do this in yet, so but when I can, what a glorious day that will be. Right, so that's the sort of bulk layers done. So I've got a couple more things to do, and for that I'm actually going to move on. So look, I want to move on to a slightly smaller brush for this one. So again, as I said, I'm trying to avoid spilling over. So next up on the list, I'm going to be doing his skin, and for that I'm going to be using a bit of, well, for anyone who's familiar with such things, surprise surprise, bit of Bugmans Glow. Alright, this will only be used on his face and a little bit on his neck. Right, so I'm going to just try. I might not water this one down simply because it's obviously a lighter paint going onto a darker one. And we're just going to apply that to the skin there. And so the helmet. So the helmet, and we've got a little bit of the whoops, where did that go? Okay, a little bit on the green there. Okay, a little bit on the green there, but managed to save it. So yeah, that's why we needed the smaller brush. Again, I'm quite happy to give it another quick tidy up in a minute, but if I can, as best as I can avoid, I will do. I can try to be as neat as possible, and I do try and be as neat as possible, but sometimes I personally find it a bit quicker just to go back over some of the areas afterwards with the original colour. So get a bit more out actually for that, just do that on the side, there's a bit missed there. So there you go. Should be a little bit more. Bit of a hard area to get to, certainly a hard area to get to and show you what I'm doing, so there you go, that's done. That's our first layer of Bugmans Glow. So I'm going to go do another little small area of paint. I do appreciate that right now this might not be looking great, but it is the initial base stages, and I always look at models at this stage and do start to think, oh dear, what am I doing? But they do get better once you add the washes. The talented are pot, as they call it. They don't call it that for no reason. So we're just applying a bit of a base coat of Mournfang Brown to the strap on the day stick. And now we're moving on to what will be the final base colour. This will be for this I'll be using Mepheston Red, or Mepheston Red as it's now called. This will be on the trim around the helmets, well, on the helmet around the goggles or visor. I'll be sticking with my artificial brush for this, as it is only a pretty small straight line area and I want maximum control. I'll include in the description below a list of all paints used, and for that I'll be sure to use the current names as they are available for even for where I've been using an older paint. Right, so that is all the base colours applied. So now I'm going to add a few washes. So the first one I'm going to be using is Armour Fleshshade on the flesh, funnily enough. And this is a bit of a smaller beaten up brush that I'm going to start things off with, just so I can, as I'm using it's going into a small area, so I'll just find this an easier way of controlling it initially. Now, for the next couple, I'm going to start off with a wash of Agrax Earthshade on every area except for the gunmetal areas. As give a little bit of water on there first, just to soften the brush up. Get a bit on that on there. Now, larger areas where control isn't as paramount. Okay, so that's the wash of Agrax Earthshade applied and pretty much dried. So now I'm just going to go over the two silver metal or the gunmetal areas and just apply a bit of Nuln Oil. Okay, get a bit more on there. But I'll apply it and then move it around to prevent it pooling. I don't mind a little bit of pooling in certain areas, like mainly just around, you see that's well, just around there, underneath where the clip joins, you know, just areas like that aren't so bad, but just on flatter areas I'm more worried about. So I'm using it quite sparingly because I don't want it to leak all over the place, even though I think I'd rather the black leak onto the green, sorry, the Nuln Oil leak onto the green areas rather than the brown leak onto the silver, because it'll be more apparent that way round. Okay, and I may attempt it with this, because this hasn't got the neatest of tips anymore, but I'm going to attempt this with on this little bit here. Okay, it's run over onto black a little bit, but obviously that's not such a big deal because it is black. Right, so with all the base colours done, I'm now going to be moving on to the layers, and for the first layer I'm going to be doing the green areas, and for that I'm going to be using Loren Forest. So a bit of that there. Tiniest little bit of water, but not too much, because I do want this won't be as thick as the base is, and I do want it to show through. But then again, I don't want to swamp everything, so I'm just going to take some of this and apply it to mainly the more raised areas, but a good covering across the raised areas. There you go, a good even covering on those more raised areas. Right, so that's the last little bit of my Loren Forest applied to all the areas, sort of the softer armoured areas, and I quite like that colour because it's not sort of camo as you might, you know, like a militaristic style, but it's not sort of the bright garish green that I was trying to avoid as well. So I think it's kind of is good for this because it strikes a good sort of in between. Right, so up next we're going to be applying the first layer to the gold areas. Now for this I'm going to be using Gehenna's Gold. Give that a good shake because that's not a paint I break out on great numbers of models, so it sits around. Yeah, that's right. And I'm going to be applying this to the the gold areas, the sort of the metal areas and armoured areas. Now I'm expecting, I am going to use a medium layer brush, as I have been for everything else, on all areas. So I expect possibly a little bit of it running over onto the black, but so I'm going to save everything with the black till the very end, so I can clean anything up. But obviously I am, at this stage, going to try my hardest to avoid getting it on there. Right, so here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do it almost similar to maybe a dry brush of this. I'm going to try and get an amount on the brush and try and just edge highlight everything, as opposed to just literally, well, on the small areas anyway, like this chain and the badge, rather than just going over it as I would with the other areas. There you go. So just trying to bring out those detail bits, but still put a heavy enough coat on there so that it brings everything out. Yeah, I'm quite liking it. I don't think I can quite make out the word Dredd on there, but it's still quite cool detail on the badge, on the shield. You call it badge or shield, but yeah, there's a little bit more just there where the chain hooks onto it. There you go. So I have got a little bit onto the black, but again, I'll come back to that in the end. If all I have to do is clean up a bit of the black, I personally think I've done quite well. Okay, so I'm going to try and get a good coverage with this, because I'm trying to keep it out of the recesses. I'm still going to give it a final highlight at the end. Now we're going to be, on the other areas I'm going to be a bit thicker with it. So I'm going to try and get it on these large areas of armour here. So just literally same as before on these little little gold feathers on the Aquila arm pad, shoulder pad, just as before. I've got a smaller amount on the brush, and I'm just going to go over them very lightly. Now, as I stated before, obviously it would be a better idea with these two, trying them a bit more detailed, possibly, and not neater, just to use a small brush possibly and do them a bit more neatly. But with this I am going for a sort of speedier job, a tabletop top standard and speedier job, so that's what I've done with that. So that's all the gold done, including his helmet, shield. Right, next up, I think that'll be the last little bit I'm doing with this. We'll move on to stuff slightly more detailed. Oh, not including the black, as I already said. I'm going to be using some Iron Breaker, and this will be on the gunmetal area. So if I just stand that up or lie it down so you can keep it in the picture, and let's have a little bit of this. So again, at this point, same brush, I'm just going to go, same as with the gold, I'm just going to lightly skim with a bit of decent amount of paint on the brush, but not too much, over the metal areas on the nightstick, daystick, sorry. There you go. Okay, so there's that little bit. Okay, so I'm just finishing the gun, the lawgiver off, and that's all the metal parts finished. In fact, with the actual gunmetal areas, I'm not going to be applying any more highlighting to those. So that's it with the silver for the minute. Right, so up next, I'm going to be switching to a detail brush for the areas of skin and the red areas. So for this, I'm using some Cadian Fleshtone just to literally do this small area of visible skin. Now, I don't know if you can see it from here or if you're familiar with them. The mouth is right up over his top lip. I personally, I think this is a fantastic little bit of characterful sculpting, because that's one of the characterful things about Dredd is very, very exaggerated expression, which I believe Kyle Urban said one of the hardest parts of playing the roles was keeping that going. I suppose Sylvester Stallone kind of really did, you know, a lot of things you'll say about that film. I certainly think Sylvester Stallone resembled the character when he was in full costume, and I suppose it all came a bit more naturally to him. Oh, I realised I'm out of shot. So I'm getting used to kind of sort of both looking through the camera and looking at it myself. Okay, just a little bit more. So with the flesh toner, well, the first layer of flesh completed, I'm now moving on to the red trim of the helmet, and for that I'm using Evil Sunz Scarlet. I suppose this is blood red in old money. That's what I'm saying, that the contrast paint, there's a contrast paint of blood red, or I believe, I haven't really used many of them so far, but I know some of the old names have returned in contrast paints. And with that first layer completed on the red trim of the helmet, we're now moving on to the final highlights. I'll be starting off with the green areas, and for that I'll be using Stracken Green. So once again, I'm going to lightly apply this, so I won't be adding any water to it. So literally, just going to keep this to the sort of just around some of the edges, mainly where the light is hitting. And for this, I'm going to continue using my detail brush, or artificial brush in this case. There you go. So I'm going to stick to pretty much that around the whole model, just keeping it to the very edges. Imagining that the light source is coming from sort of this sort of side. There's the highlights of Stracken Green added to the green areas. So up next we're going to be moving on to the gold, and for this I'm going to be using the Auric Armour Gold. So we'll first of all give that a good shake, and I'll just be applying this to the edges. Get that consistency in there. Right, see how we get on with this. So once again I'll be applying sort of thicker coats. Okay, so oops, get that in focus. There you go. In fact, I won't start with that bit, I'll start on a bit that you can actually see quite visibly. So I'm just going to go around the edges with this. Just around the end of the gold feathers. So you get a decent amount on the brush and just run straight over them all. Probably the quickest way to do it. It's not the neatest, but it gets the job done. Okay, so there's the gold just done. I don't know how easily you can see that, but that's just applied to the edge highlights to bring that to the edge of the gold armour, just to bring that up, and of course on the helmet. So next up we're moving on to the final couple of highlights on the bulk of the miniature, and for this I'll be using Kislev Flesh, just on the face. I say just on the face, on the absolute tip of his lip. Get a bit more of that off there actually. So I want it quite thick, but it does need to, I don't want it overspilling too much. So I'm going to just pronounce the lip. And that's pretty much it with this. There you go. And then maybe just the littlest bit on there, under his chin. There you go. So I'll just dry down and then finally, until we move onto the black areas, I'm going to be applying a bit of Warlord Red to the trim of his helmet visor. With this, I don't know if I'm going to go completely all the way around, because I just want to keep it to the main areas. Sorry, to the front, facing us where the light's going to be. So I'll keep a bit there and then just go around. And then we'll keep a bit on the top here. Right, and so that's all the highlights completed on everything but the black. While I just had the camera off there for a second, I've just neatened up the black itself, the black areas, and I've added a little spot of scrag brown as a highlight for the strap on his day stick, which I did forget in the initial part of the video. Right then, so we're going to be adding highlights to the uniformed areas and the nightstick, the day stick. I'm not going to get that right. The day stick, and for that, we'll start with. I'm going to first apply a little line of Eshin Grey using my detail brush. Now this I want to be careful with because I've got to try and get sort of as perfect a line as possible, just running down the one side. So where am I going to be using the highlights? So if I do that, then I'll kind of run it down the middle here. Okay. A highlight for that. And then next, we're going to add sort of first say highlights, going to be more of a layer, and I'm going to add it to the main part of the uniform. For this I'll be using Dark Reaper, and these things just aren't staying open, so a little bit out of here. This, as I say, as it's the layer, add a little bit of water to that to get started. Working as a sort of from a light source, I'm going to be adding some spots of it around, and because it's been watered down it should blend in with the black quite nicely. So as the first layer is completed, both the Eshin Grey on the nightstick and the Dark Reaper on the helmet and uniform, mainly sticking to the folds in the cloth and to the sort of, sort of ripples in his muscle, I suppose, under there, which I've gone along with. Right then, so up next we're going to add, this is the proper highlight now. I'm going to be adding to the day stick a little bit of Dawnstone. Once again, these things don't stay open. So this is going to be a very, very light little bit just at the top of the stick. The grey starts, so I'm going to start here and just do a little bit of that on there. That's all. A bit more just to. And we'll be adding a little bit of watered down Thunderhawk Blue as the highlight for the Dark Reaper on the uniform and helmet. And once again, I'll be adding a bit of water to this to help it blend in with the colour that's underneath. Okay. So I'm just going to add a very small amount just at the very base, that little patch of Dark Reaper, and then just a little bit in the middle on the helmet there where the area is most reflective. Okay, so that's all the highlights now done to the black areas. Now the last thing to do will be the visor, and for that I'm going to be gradually building up some edge highlights, starting with a base of Caliban Green. Then I'll be moving on to Warpstone Glow, a Moot Green, and finally a little dot of white scar just to round it off. So that's going to take up pretty much the majority of the visor to begin with. But due to the darkness there, I'm only going to do this on the one side, the shadow cast on the other side. So we built the green up there just finally to a little spot of white on the very bottom, and I'll finish that off by going over the helmet with a bit of Ardcoat varnish. Just to help sort of identify, just to give it obviously the shine and just sort of identify it as being a different material to the other black areas. So for this I'm going to be going all over the red, black and visor area, but I'll be avoiding the gold shield at the front of the helmet. And here we have the based and completed Judge Joseph Dredd along with his colleagues and the alternate version of himself on Lawmaster. With regards to the base, just complete it to match the border terrain you'll be using, and the Lawmaster was completed using all of the same techniques I've described in the video. I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you have, please like, comment and subscribe. And for regular updates, please follow us on Twitter @Warlord Games. Until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.